tears and maybe groaning and maybe some travail and intercession. That wasn't taught to me by a man, but it was brought to me by the Holy Ghost. He came upon me, and I did battle for my grandmother. First time ever. I was filled with the Holy Ghost a year before, and now I had gotten a report from Texas where my grandmother was visiting my aunt. I like to say this because people say, well, you know what? He doesn't really like people from the South. So I was going to say, anybody from the South here? Yeah, get out. No. My grandma's down in Texas visiting my relatives, my aunt and my uncle and my cousins. And the call came. I was going to college at that time, the University of Wisconsin in Eau Claire. And the call came on Thursday night that Grandma was in the hospital in San Antonio, and she had 9 golf ball-sized tumors on her lungs. 9 golf ball-sized tumors. And I was taken aback, because, when you're young and Grandma's always around, you don't think there's ever a chance that she's going to go and she's going to die. And I got pretty scared, wondered about it, and I thought to myself, I know my grandma's always been a strong rock for me. And the next night, it was a Friday night, I'll never forget it, and I was going to college, and I was renting a farm, a small farm south of town, and I had 2 golden retriever dogs, and they were my boys, and we just would have a great time together. And that Friday night, I just felt to keep the dogs downstairs because they were always upstairs and slobbering all over me. You know, dogs, sometimes if you let dogs up where you're sleeping, they put their... And Ivan, he was goofy. I don't know what I'm thinking this night, but Ivan, when he went to drink in his water dish, he had to put his hand in the water dish and drink from it. I think it was he was little, it would move around, and so he learned how to put his foot in there. So when Ivan would go down for a drink and come up, I knew I was going to get doused with a wet paw, because when Ivan would come to bed, he would jam into me, slam into me, and put his arm around me just like this. I think the dog was human. I'm not sure. He was one of the only dogs. I remember he was on television one time because I had 2 of them. One was his little brother from a different litter. And Ivan, instead of coming bringing the ball back and dropping it at your feet, Ivan learned how to throw it. Not only did he learn how to throw it, but he learned how to teach his little brother, Rudy, how to throw it back. So on television, you see 2 golden retrievers throwing the ball, the other one catching it, and the other one throwing it back. They're out in the backyard playing ball, playing catch. They were the most amazing things I've ever seen in my life. I was pretty blessed. But that night I said, okay, you guys are going to stay down here, and I'm going to just go upstairs, and I'm just going to get a good night's sleep and think about the Lord and think about Grandma and try to figure this whole thing out. And I was pretty troubled in my mind. And what I did was I started talking to the Lord just like I'm talking to you now. And I started by saying, Lord, I remember when Grandma woke me up in the middle of the night. I was about 10. And we had to go up north and get the deer because it was too warm. And so she was going to change out the Corvair for the station wagon, and she's going to bring the deer back because it was warm. And I had to go with her, and it was in the middle of the night, and I was all scared. And here I was, all little, sitting next to my grandma in this big Corvair, sitting next to her. She'd always give me a piece of spearmint gum so my stomach wouldn't get sick when we were driving. But I was a scaredy cat when I was little, just scared of everything, scared of the dark, scared of monsters under the bed and in the closet and all that good stuff. But Grandma was always there, and she was always protecting me. When I was little, I sucked my thumb. They say it's a sign of insecurity. I don't know. I just maybe like the flavor of my thumb. I don't know. But I did it until I was in 1st grade. And because of that, I had buck teeth. So my grandma was the one that she created a cast that she made for my thumb and put it on there. and broke me of that habit when I was little. She was something else, and I talked to the Lord about that. I said, remember that? I said, I remember the cast she put on my thumb. And then he said to me, he said, do you remember what her basement smelled like? It's kind of cool that the Lord asked me that. I said, yeah, I do. I said, and this side it was the old oil thing that was down there, so it smelled like fuel oil. And over here was Grandpa's fly dope that he used to dip his flies in to preserve them before he got into the stream. And over here was a bleach from Grandma's wash machine. And I said, do you remember on Fridays that they used to take us down to and walk us down to St. Sebastian's, and we would go to fish fry every Friday night? And he'd say, do you remember the time? And I say, do you remember the time? And God would say, do you remember the time? And we told Grandma stories that night, him and I, just the Lord and I, told Grandma stories. And until I couldn't even remember one more. And I said to him, I said, I know Grandma's Catholic. And I said, so I don't know where she is as far as with you. And I'm a little scared because heaven just wouldn't be heaven without Grandma. I remember telling him that, and as soon as I told him that, I started to cry. And it wasn't just a crying, it was thinking of not being there with her. Thinking of her not being there with me. And I started to cry deeper and harder, and I started to pray and cry in the Spirit. And there was a groaning that started in me, such as I've never felt or seen before. And I was doubled up in a fetal position, just crying out to the Lord and groaning before the Lord. In prayer meetings, you got to realize I'll scare most of you to death. But I travail sometimes, and I intercede sometimes, and I cry out to the Lord sometimes. And I can remember that night, I must have prayed for hours just like that. I had no more tears. I ended up drifting off into sleep. When I woke up the next morning, my bed was still wet from sweat and from tears. It was the most intense time I've ever had. I had never experienced that. I didn't know what it was. All I knew that it was for Grandma. Grandma Mattia. And I went through the rest of my weekend just normal. Monday she was supposed to have the surgery. I went to class on Monday. I finished my last class, and I was back home by 3 o'clock that afternoon. And I got home, and all of a sudden it hit me. Oh, Grandma's had her surgery today. I wonder how she did. And I said, I believe God, you could have done something there. I don't know. And I called down to the hospital expecting that my Aunt Carol would answer the phone, but my Grandma Mattia answered the phone. And I said, Grandma? She goes, who is this? I said, it's your grandson, Mark. She goes, oh. She says, you shouldn't be calling me. It's going to cost you too much money. She was always worried about that. And I said, it's fine. What are you doing answering the phone? She says, well, you got a few minutes? I said, yeah, I got a few minutes. What are you doing answering the phone? She said, well, it's a really strange thing that happened today. She said, they did the x-rays on Friday and saw where the tumors were, the golf ball sized tumors. You heard about that, right? And I said, I heard about that. Why are you answering the phone? And I'm expecting that it did not go good. And she says, well, she says they gave me the shot to dope me up before they wheeled me into an x-ray one more last time so that they could see if anything had moved or changed. She said, so they gave me the shot to dope me up, and I went in, and next thing I know, I woke up in my room, and I thought that everything was over, and I looked up, and there's all these doctors around my bed. 30 doctors teaching, one of the best teaching hospitals in the United States at San Antonio Medical Center. And all these doctors around my bed, she said. And they were all looking down at their shoes and kind of kicking at the ground, and everybody was really quiet and sullen, and she said, she used the word sullen. My grandma was very intelligent. I'd write her letters from college. She'd circle the misspellings and send it back to me. That's the way Grandma was. She was incredible. So she said, I looked at the head honcho. Call him the head honcho. I looked at the head honcho and I told him, I said, just tell me what it is. She said, And this is her exact words. I'm a saved woman. God has got me in the palm of his hand, and I know where I'm going when I die. Now that just, when she said that out of her mouth, it just freed me up. And that's the question that I had. Are you okay, Grandma? Are you going to go to heaven? She was a very godly woman. But because I had put the denominational box around her, it kind of limited and caused me to fear. So he looks down at me, and he says, no, Mrs. Mattei, you don't understand. And she said they had that x-ray thing right up next to my bed, and they put the x-ray up Friday, and they said, this is the tube, this is the x-ray from Friday, and you can see all the tumors here. She says, I've already seen this. Just tell me tell me what's going on. And they put up the next x-ray, and they said, Miss Mattei, this is your x-ray we took this morning. And she looks at it, and he says, you'll notice that there's no tumors there. But there's little scar tissue where every tumor was, like somebody had gone in and operated this weekend. Left a remnant that somebody had been there. Didn't just remove the tumor, but left scar tissue. And Mrs. Mattei, we can't explain this as anything but a miracle.